Where you going? No, man. You got the right classroom. Come on in, take a seat beside me, my friend. Hey, look, here come T.A. Charlie. Let's see what he got to say.
Hey, good morning. Wrong person. Good morning. I'm the original Charlie. We've had a change of programming. And I've been told since this Worship Wednesday, I'm not allowed to act like an idiot today. So I think that's going to be a problem anyway. But anyway, the professor took the day off, and this fake Charlie dude, that guy, he's going to be doing the show. So I'm just going to shut up and I'm going to let you listen to him.
Hey, we all know T.A. Charlie isn't all there. Now, just stay seated and give it a chance. You'll soon realize we not might be the smartest, but we each independently form opinions based on reason and logic. We're free thinkers. Let's see what the road to Concord with Professor Joe Bacanovic has on the lesson plan for today.
Well, I'm not a professor, and just as a disclaimer, I'm also not a financial advisor. So, but then again, with the current laws that are in place, I could be. I could call myself one, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I did this presentation for our congregation a few weeks ago, and so for any of you that saw that, you'll get a little refresher on a lot of this. I have added to the presentation, and I'll be getting into a little bit more detail as we go along. But I thought this would be a topic that would be helpful, hopefully, to some of our classmates. And as we go through this, please, Natasha will be monitoring the chats and stuff. If you have questions as we go along, put them up here. Just a little bit about myself. Like I said, I'm not a financial advisor, but I have, managed my finances over the years, and I've made some pretty disastrous mistakes here and there. I've made some good decisions along the way, and I was able to retire last year, roughly around this time, actually last year, at the ripe old age of 62. And so I think I've done fairly well. Yahweh has blessed me tremendously. Like I said, he overlooked my, mistakes and stuff, and has allowed me to be successful in some of the things that I've done. So I'm hoping that some of this information I'll provide to you today will be helpful to you. And if you would like personalized advice, there is Joe at the road to Concord.com. Yeah, I'll get to you in a second, Joe. And see, I'm in charge today, Joe. But if you would like, and I'll give you this also disclaimer. My advice is free and you get what you pay for. So, but if you would like some hints and kinks, I'd be glad to talk to anyone. Yes, Joe.
It's biblical based financing, right?
It is. I'm trying to as best I can.
I just check
Yes.
to make sure, because
Yes.
it is Worship Wednesday.
It is Worship Wednesday, but you won't. Well, I can't say you won't find financial advice in the Bible. You do, but you have to look at the Bible as a wisdom book.
Yeah, Proverbs says I'm supposed to have something so that I can share with others in need.
That's one of the things it does say.
And also says that I'm to be condemned if I don't take care of my family.
That's correct. There's lots of scriptures like that, and I've only got a smattering of them that I've put in throughout this presentation, but it'll give you an idea of what's in the Bible that you can use to
But
help
the point is that this is a Worship Wednesday show.
It is a Worship Wednesday show. And that's why I'm doing this, because we need to be able to take care of ourselves, because if we can't take care of ourselves, we can't take care of anyone else. And as we're coming into these times of difficulty, all the stuff I'm going to talk to you about today may become mute if our nation, ends up going away and our currency that is not based by anything anymore goes away. But that's things that, we'll talk about another day. But anyway, without any further ado, I'm going to put up a little presentation here, and I'm probably going to bop myself out of here so that you can see this, because some of my slides are a bit busy. These are on theroadtoconcord.com. You can pull them down. Like I said, some of them are a bit busy. Let's see here. I think I need this one. Yeah, there we go. And all right, so we're going to try to keep this, based on the Bible. This is just a rough outline of the things we're going to be covering today. Starting first with budget basics, learning to live on less than you earn. And then we're going to talk about banishing debt. And we'll talk quite extensively about a debt avalanche is what I call it. There's other words for it, debt stacking and some other terms, but that's the one I like. And then we'll talk about starting savings and how to build on that. And then we'll be talking about future planning and what we can do to hopefully leave a legacy if things go well. All right, so budget basics. Live on less than you earn. This can be difficult for some people. There's some people that have trouble just making it paycheck to paycheck. And so this section is for those people that you're struggling to make ends meet and you're looking for ways to help improve that situation. So if this is you, pay attention here, and I'll give you some ideas that hopefully will help you at least in planning, and then there are some hard decisions you're going to have to make. All right, and like we said, this is a Worship Wednesday, so of course we have to have some scriptures here. And I like this one because there's other interpretations of this, but it fits into this financial presentation. For which of you desiring to build a tower does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, "This man began to build and was not able to finish." And you might say, well, Charlie, what does that have to do with my finances? Well, this is a parable. In my opinion, it's a parable of those people that are living, paycheck to paycheck, because many don't sit down and actually figure out what their actual income and expenses are. And they end up being short at the end of the month and saying, "Oh, what happened?" And so this is that man that began to build and was not able to finish. All right, so this is what we're going to talk about in this part of the presentation. We're going to talk about creating a budget, and it's actually fairly simple in the actual, numbers part of it. Where it gets difficult is at the end. Because first, you're basically just going to identify all your income sources. We'll talk about that and give you some ideas of income sources that you may have and may have forgotten about or didn't consider. And then we're going to talk about expenses. I'll warn you right now, that slide is very busy, but I just tried to throw in there a lot of things that you might not consider, especially in remembering irregular bills that, aren't necessarily monthly bills, but that you have to take into consideration overall in your at least annual budgeting. And then we're going to talk about the hard part of this whole process, and that's evaluating needs versus wants. All right, so here we go. This is kind of what Joe was talking about earlier in the presentation. This is from 1 Timothy 5:8. But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he is denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. So we have a biblical responsibility to take care of our family.
Ooh,
yes.
Yes,
Joe.
I'm an honorary member of the Sweat Hogs. Some of you may have to go back a ways for that. For those of us who have been taught the worldly way of doing this, where the government takes care of your relatives, did this not just say for your relatives?
Yes.
Not just children or mom and dad, but like if you've got a close relative of the family that needs help because they were born with a disability or they get hurt or injured or sick, We're not
Yes.
supposed to push that off on Caesar, are we? That's Paul's telling us that that's our job, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
So
So,
so maybe we need to amend the slide later to responsibilities, then needs and wants,
yeah,
or
that could
somehow
be. Yes.
just a thought.
Yeah,
Sorry about.
that's good. Yeah. No, that's good. All right. So let's see here. All right. All right. And this is just a boilerplate of identifying different types of incomes that you may have. And of course, most of us have some type of regular employment. That's what you'll first think of is income. But you may have situations where you have child support or alimony coming in. Um, if you're paying too much in taxes, you'll have tax returns that'll come in at the end of the year. I don't recommend doing that. Don't give Uncle Sam a free loan of money throughout the year. Uh, Inheritances, Social Security, if you're old enough for that, pensions, annuities, investments, and other forms of income. So these are the things that we want to look at when we're finding the sources that actually provide the money that's coming into your budget. And of course, we have some more scriptures. 2 Corinthians 9:7, each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And from Proverbs 3:9, you'll find a lot of these scriptures come from Proverbs. Honor Yahweh with your wealth and with first fruits of all your produce. So there you go. There's some more things as far as what you need to be doing with your finances. And I told you, I promised you there was a busy slide coming up, and here it is. This is identifying expenses. Now, these are pretty much recurring expenses that, most of them are monthly or quarterly expenses that you regularly will have. And the first one I put on here, since this is biblical finance, is tithing and offerings. In the scriptures, it does actually designate 3 times a year that you bring your tithes to the temple. Of course, now we acknowledge the temple as the body of the saints, and there's other things regarding that. As far as tithing, we could go into a whole separate lesson on that, because part of that is also taking care of the widows and orphans, and we don't have an Aaronic priesthood anymore. But if you have people that are providing you with teaching and helping you with your faith, that may be a place that you want to donate some of your funds to as well. And the second one is also important. That's an emergency fund. This principle is pay yourself first. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into savings. But that's important because, while we're going to talk about all these expenses, there are situations that come up in life that you won't be planning for. There'll be things that come up that, you had no idea were going to come up. And when faced with those things, it's tough sometimes if you're really tight on your budget. In fact, statistics right now is that I believe it's like 40% of Americans, when faced with a $1,000 emergency, can't do it. They can't do it. So let's fix that. And of course, your rent, mortgage, utilities, and I listed those out. Some of the things that, some of the more, things that you might not think of utilities, cable, streaming, internet, phone, those things fall in there. Of course, food, vehicle loan, if you have that, life insurance, vehicle insurance, and those things, credit cards and student loans. And I'll talk a little bit about student loans as we go along. Worst thing to do ever. Do not take out student loans if there is any possible way you can get around it, because those things do not go away. The only thing that causes a student loan to go away is death. So anyway, all right. And here are just some things. Oh, that slide got messed up somehow. Sorry about that. But these are expenses that are irregular. And like taxes, they usually just come around once a year, at least for income taxes, but there may be other forms of taxes that come at, not regular times of the year. And like your home, your real estate taxes, that's again, usually once a year. Vehicle registrations, clothing, because, of course, well, if you're my wife, you probably could call this a regular expense, but but for me, yeah, I don't buy clothes all that often. Vehicle fuel, that can be an irregular expense. If you are taking trips or such that are not your normal just commute stuff. Hygiene, cleaning supplies, and yada yada, right on through here. Important things down here at the bottom is like your maintenance things for vehicle and home. Yes, Charlie.
So you're saying irregular expenses are things that we need, but we don't buy every month,
Right.
not necessarily every month.
Right, but you have to still plan for these things, because if you have these expenses come up and you don't have them in your budget, then that can cause you to have problems by not having enough money.
So this is why sometimes, because I got an expense in my business that comes every quarter, and sometimes I go, oh darn, when it shows up because I forgot to do it.
All right.
and then like on the show here, when we've got to pay our annual fees for some of the programs we use, it goes, oh crap, because I forgot they were coming. So what I'm saying is, don't forget.
Yeah. Yep.
Has anybody seen my brain lately? It's kind of old. It doesn't remember things. Anyway, I'm going.
Yep. All right. So anyway, yeah. But things like vehicle maintenance, home maintenance, those are things that people forget about. Replacement cell phones. If you need a cell phone for business or, even for your employment, those are things you don't think about sometimes. So, all right. Now, here's the hard part, because this is where you have to take some time for serious self-examination, especially, like I said, if you're in that situation where, there's more month than there is paycheck. And this is where you gotta make some hard decisions sometimes. And, we always talk about needs and wants. And of course, everybody always talks about food, clothing, and shelter. That's really all you need. Well, yes, that's true. But in our society today, there are some other things that you could classify as needs, because public transportation, like around here where I live, there ain't public transportation that's worth a hoot. So if you need to get back and forth to work, you got to have some type of transportation. So that could be classified as a need. Health and life insurance, you could say, well, that's really not a need. Although the progressives will tell you that, oh, health insurance is a right. No, it's not. But you should have some form of health insurance, even if it's just a catastrophic plan that will help with when something really goes bad. And life insurance, if you are the primary breadwinner in your family, you need to have life insurance to take care of your family if something does happen to you and that income stops, because that is the true use of life insurance. Yes.
Term life insurance, right? Not whole.
Oh yes. We'll get into more details on that, but yes, term, okay. Not whole.
I'm kind of slow at this, so I just need help.
Unless you're rich. If you're really rich, then there are some uses for whole life.
But like I said,
for most people that we're talking to, nope, you'll be looking at term, and we'll go into more detail at that later on in the presentation.
Thanks, Teach.
Yep. And then vehicle registration and insurance. If you, of course, need that for transportation for employment, you got to consider those things. And a cell phone, you got to have some kind of communications, especially if you're working, a job where they may, call you in irregularly or something like that, to keep that money flowing in. So that could be considered a need. And then here's the bottom line. You need to look very carefully at all your income and expenses, and you need to see if there's, not enough income to make it to the end of the month. Where can you make those cuts and adjustments if necessary so that you're living on less than you earn? That is what we're trying to get to, is living on less than we earn. And there's two ways of handling that situation. If there's more month than there is money, you got two choices. You can either cut expenses, do without something, or you can earn more income. And there's different ways of doing that. You can get another job. You could look for a better paying job and things like that. So those are the things you need to look at as you go through life and trying to better yourself. All right. Now, banishing debt. This is a big part of this. Because I'll tell you straight out, when I was in the military, I carried a lot of credit card debt for a good long time. And I'm grateful that situations worked out for me as I was exiting the military. I was able to eliminate that. And oh, what a blessing that was. So we're going to talk about how to handle this. If you do have credit card debt and other debts, I'm not just talking credit card, but that's one that's a big part. We're going to talk about how to get rid of this stuff. So here we go. And Hebrews 12:11. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Now, Charlie, what does this have to do with finances? This is exactly what we're talking about.
Which Charlie?
Well, which Charlie? Well,
You're not Charlie today. You're
well,
fake
I'm
You're
Charlie.
the teacher.
I'm fake Charlie. But anyway, what's it got to do with it? Because dealing with this stuff with finances is not easy. It's going to be painful as you get through this. But if you do it and you're successful, like I was in getting rid of my credit card debt, oh my gosh, that helped a lot to train me to not do that again. And so even though it was painful as I went through the process, in the end, it helped me so that I could better manage my credit. And we're going to talk about that later on in the presentation as well. So this stuff can be difficult, but as we look at the biblical principles, Yahweh, corrects those that he loves, and this is part of that process. So we're going to talk about first understanding debt and just briefly go over some of the types of debt and some of the differences in them. The first debt we'll talk about is secured debt. This is where you take out a debt and you have some collateral against that debt so that if something happened and you defaulted on that, the creditor has some recompense where they can come and, repossess your home or vehicle to help them, be restored for what you're unable to pay. So secured debt, that, a lot of us don't have the resources to pay cash for home or possibly even vehicles. So in some circumstances, that debt can be good in a way. It can be useful if it's used prudently and wisely, and that you're sure that, like, if you talk to a real estate agent when you're looking for a home, they're going to tell you all the time, buy the biggest home you can afford, and and all this stuff. Don't do that. We didn't. I love my wife because as we were looking for our first home, and we got our first home late in life because in the military, we were traveling all over the place, and it didn't make sense for us to purchase a home. But when we were settling down, we did that. And, the home we bought was a very modest home. It was not, anything to, write home to mama about, but it met our needs and it was affordable. We knew we could make that mortgage month after month without any problem. And over time, we actually paid that home off. Now we don't live there anymore, and I violated one of the principles of retirement because I'm in a different home now, and I have a mortgage, and I'm retired. That's something most financial advisors will tell you never do. Do not take a mortgage into retirement if you can at all help it. But because of the unusual circumstances that were going on at the time we bought this house, our mortgage rate is in the high twos in interest rate. And as inflation and stuff is picked up and everything, I earn more money just in a regular savings account now than what the carry rate is on my mortgage. So it makes sense for me to carry that mortgage instead of paying it off. So those are things to consider as you get more into figuring this stuff out. Unsecured debt. This is money that's given to you just based on your good name and your good credit rating. Like I said, student loans is in a category all by itself because of our wonderful Congress and our elected officials. They have helped this industry create a fake lending system. I'm going to call it that. And student loans cannot be relinquished in bankruptcy. And like I said, the only way you can make a student loan go away is to die. So do not take out student loans unless you absolutely have to, and you know that your degree is going to pay off. And one of the axioms that one of the people I follow uses, I follow Clark Howard. He's a financial commentator and consumer advocate and such. He says, do not take out a student loan greater than what you expect your first annual earnings to be, the first year of annual earnings. So like if you expect that your starting pay is going to be $45,000, do not take out a loan more than $45,000. Because there's people that take out hundreds of thousands of student loans, and then they get a degree in basket weaving and they find out that they can't find a job in basket weaving because nobody does basket weaving anymore. And now they're burdened with this student loan that they cannot make the payments on, and it just destroys their credit rating. So student loans, stay away from it. It is evil. It's the plague. Credit cards. Again, these can be useful, but do not carry a balance on credit cards. Credit card interest rates now, with the inflation that we're seeing, are generally in the 20% range or higher. Some of them go as high as 30% in some states. You're talking about 30 cents on every dollar is your carry rate on credit cards. So you're paying 30 cents on every dollar just to have that credit. Credit cards can be useful, and we'll talk about that later on when I talk a little bit more detail about credit cards, but do not carry a balance. And then there's personal loans. These are just loans that you would go to a bank and say, hey, I need money for XYZ. And just based on your credit rating and good standing, they'll give you money. And again, those rates are going to be pretty high as well. And then the last category is medical debt. And this one also is in its own separate category because just recently in the last couple of years, they have made some changes to credit reporting and credit guidelines in regards to medical debt, where debts of less than $1,000, I believe it is, do not affect your credit report anymore. And those that are over that limit, you've got I believe it's a year to clear those up before they'll actually start affecting your credit, because the medical insurance processes are horrible. They bill incorrectly, the insurances don't pay right, and then you got to go fight. I'm dealing with that right now with my wife. We have a primary insurance, and then we have a supplement, and somehow with our insurer, the supplement got listed as our primary, and so they're denying all of our claims. And we've called them like 4 times and have yet to get it resolved to where they're actually paying claims again. And this process may go on for, upwards of a year to get this stuff actually corrected. So that's why they did this. And then another category for debt is fixed debt. That would be like a vehicle loan. You've got a fixed number of months, like a 36-month loan. And once you pay your payments every month for 36 months, it goes away. And then a revolving loan would be like a credit card where you can, charge on that on a monthly basis, and you can continue to charge on it and pay it off and charge on it and pay it off. And they call that revolving debt. All right. So now you might say, what does this chart have to do with debt? Because this is actually talking about saving. But hold on a second, and you'll see here in a second, hopefully. My wife's in there chiming in, and I don't know what I said about my wife and student loans, but anyway. This is talking about compounding of interest. If you have some money that you put into a bank, and this is using $1,000, and you just put it in the bank, and then you take out the interest that they pay every month, that $1,000 of principal is just going to stay there. And then as if you leave the interest in there with no compounding, you'll see where it goes up. But as you leave the interest in there and earn interest on the interest, that's where it shows the compounding of the interest. And the same thing happens with debt, only it's in reverse. So the more debt you have, the higher your interest is that you're paying, and the harder it is to pay it off and get rid of it. So compound interest can help you if you're using money to make money, but if you're using it for credit, it works against you. And interest doesn't take holidays, it doesn't take vacations, it's always there, and you're always fighting that battle. So that's why you want to minimize your debt as much as possible and use this compounding of interest to benefit you. And this is just another one. This just shows what compounding can do for you. And this is just a thing that somebody put together a few years ago. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And this is just showing where somebody that's 15 years old starts putting away $2,000 a year, and they do that for 10 years, and then they stop contributing. They don't do anything else. But by their 70th birthday, they're basically a millionaire, at least, close enough for argument's sake. So that shows how compounding can work in your benefit over time, because that's what's called the time value of money. And so that's what helps you when you're making money is the time and the amount of money. And of course, if you put more money in there, it works out even better. So when you're looking at planning for retirement, the earlier you start, the better. All right, and here's another scripture here, Romans 13:8. Owe no one anything except to love each other, for the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. So it says to owe no one anything. Yeah, that's a good goal. If you can do that, that's great. Yes.
That's because if you owe them, they own you.
That is right.
And you can't do what you're supposed to, not necessarily be able to do what you're supposed to.
That's why I say, interest doesn't sleep. It's always there. It's always, whittling away at your money. So, yes, that's why, as much as possible, you want to avoid debt. All right. So now, what do you do if you are in debt and you've got a lot of it? How do you get out of that situation? And there's two different approaches. Um, I'm going to cover these two approaches, and this is called the debt avalanche. Some people call it debt stacking. There's probably some other uh, names for this, but these are really tried and true methods of getting rid of debt. The first approach is lowest balance, and this gives more immediate feedback, and it kind of feels better because you can see the results of what you're doing faster. But the most effective way is doing it based on the highest interest rate. Because if you attack the money that's got the higher interest rate, you're knocking down that balance and reducing the amount of interest or your carry cost that you're paying month over month. So it may initially feel like it's taking longer because, say, for example, your biggest debt is got the highest interest rate and you start attacking that, it may take you years to get that debt eliminated. Whereas the lowest balance one, you could knock one out in maybe a few months. So it may feel like it's taking longer, but it's actually more effective as far as the actual numbers of money. And both of these methods assume you will take on no additional debt. You've got to stop, like if these are credit cards and such, you've got to stop using them or this stuff doesn't work, of course. Because if you keep adding on to the pile, even though you're whittling it down, it's just going to be counterproductive. All right. And so this is the lowest balance one. You're going to pay the minimum payments on all your credit cards and loans, basically everything that you've got, and then put any remaining available cash to the debt with the lowest balance. And as that lowest balance debt is paid off, you're going to move to next debt with the next lowest balance. And then you'll put all that money that you were paying towards on the first debt plus the minimum payment you were paying on that particular loan of the next lowest balance, creating what's called a debt avalanche. So you're putting more and more money towards these debts each month. As you eliminate the debts, you have more money to put towards the next debt. So in the end, you're actually going to be snowballing and eliminating these debts more quickly. And you just continue this process till all your debts are eliminated. And the highest interest rate is the same basic principle. But again, this one, you're going to target the highest interest rate first. And so you'll start hacking at the debt with the highest interest rate until that debt is paid off. And then you move to the debt with the next highest interest rate. And again, all the money that you were putting towards that initial highest interest rate debt, you will put all that money plus what the minimum payment was that you were paying on the next highest rate and continue until those are eliminated or exterminated here. It's fairly simple, in concept, can be difficult in application because this does take discipline and you're not going to fix this problem overnight. You're probably going to take, on average, most people doing this approach, it's going to take potentially 3 to 5 years, depending on how much debt you have. And it could take a little bit longer. So you've got to be patient with this process. Start saving. Okay, so this is the next thing. Okay, we've figured out our budget. We're having a little bit of extra money because we've either cut our budget or we've increased our income so that we're earning or we're living on less than we earn. And we've started eliminating debt or have eliminated debt. And then the next step in this process is to start saving. And this, you want to start small, but keep building. You want to make this a habit, is what you're trying to do. You're trying to make saving a habit so that it becomes second nature to you. So what am I talking about here? All right. In Proverbs 21:20, precious treasure and oil are in a wise man's dwelling, but a foolish man devours it. So again, this is talking about, storing up for yourself. They're talking about oil here and treasure, but foolish men just go through it and wipe it out. So we want to have some reserves here, and that's what we're talking about. We need some reserves to help us in emergencies, or if one of your goals is retiring, to have that money available so that you can retire later in your life. All right, so as we make this a habit, we're going to start small and build. And this is just an idea. Start by saving just 1%. That's taking 1 penny out of your every dollar you're earning, and more, of course, if you're able, and start investing that into a high yield online savings account. There are some savings accounts that you can find online now that are playing into the fives now, 5% interest. You can go to a website called bankrate.com. They have, basically listings of high yield savings accounts online. You do want to kind of look through that list because they do have some advertising, promoted rates and stuff. But look through the list and look through the interest rates, and you'll find those that are high yield and making some good interest rates. And use payroll deduction if it's available. A lot of companies, many of them now, will allow you to split your direct deposit to where you get the majority of your pay coming into your normal checking account or whatever, but you can designate a portion of your pay to go to a high yield savings account. That way you don't even see the money. It doesn't come into your hands. It goes straight in there. Another way you can do this is through automatic transfers. Many banks now have processes you can use to set it up where you automatically takes from your checking or savings account and transfers it to another financial institution or whatever, so that this stuff is kind of automatic and you don't even see it, so you don't miss it. And then I'd challenge you to increase this by 1% every 6 months. So if you do this every year, you're increasing your savings by 2%. So in five years, you're saving 10%. And if you keep doing this, you'll get it up even higher and higher. And I encourage you to continue doing this until you have enough this is what I would call an emergency account, until you have enough to cover 6 months of living expenses, so that if you were to be laid off or fired or somehow your job went away, you would be okay for 6 months. Yes.
I like this method because if I start when I'm 10, by the time I'm 70, I'm saving 110% of what I make.
Right. And that's exactly what you do. You keep doing this until you can't stand it anymore and you can't give it any more into savings. But yeah, you keep doing this. And then once you have that 6 months of living expenses, then I would add investing to your savings habit. And we'll talk about that as we get into that portion of the presentation. But there are different investing vehicles, and there are some vehicles that you may even want to use for part of this emergency fund because of some of the tax benefits and such. And we'll talk about that as we go along. And like we said, like Joe was saying, yeah, I get to where I'm putting in 110% of my income. Of course, you can't really do that realistically, but continue adding to this savings until you simply can't add more. And really, in reality, as you get pay raises, I know when I was in the military and I continued this after I got out, when I'd get a pay raise, I would split it where 50% would go into discretionary and 50% of that raise I would direct towards some savings vehicle. So as you get promotions and pay raises and things like that, uh, take some of that money and direct it towards savings. All right, now planning for the future. This is talking about leave a legacy. And this is where we'll get into some of the things that are a little bit more complicated here. But this is from Proverbs 13:22. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous. So again, this is like we were talking about earlier. You have a responsibility to your family, and you know, if you look through biblical times, uh, that was part of how things worked. Is as a son would leave his father's home and go out, he would take a portion of that inheritance with him to give him a start in life. And traditionally, the firstborn would get a double inheritance or get the remainder of what was left and things like that. We don't live in a society that necessarily is the case today, but those principles still do apply. Yes.
Now, no, Charlie. Now, this is one of the areas where we've got to recognize that our world has trained us to be worldly and come away from the scriptural way of doing things. The founding fathers taught us this all the time. Frugality. Don't spend more than you need to spend. And they taught us to take care of ourselves and to take care of our family, our spouses, our children. And when we do what you're teaching us and we help our children as they leave the house, it keeps them from having to go into debt just to start their lives.
Right.
And if we all practiced this, if we were all still a biblical based society practicing its teachings, we would have very little need for all of the programs that are consuming our wealth through taxes. We
Right.
wouldn't be where we're at, which is what you cited in the scriptures a little while ago. There are scriptures that says, if you do your finances correctly, you live the peace of a righteous man. It seems rough at the beginning, but you'll live the peace of the righteous person. That's what it's talking about. When you live according to Yahweh's plan, you don't have the worries of the world that choke most people out of their faith and cause them to start doing things out of their own estimation that get you farther and farther away from the scriptures and from Yahweh's word. And that's part of the reason we're going to have trouble with all this is you got to kick yourself out of the world's system, out of the beast's system.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Cause a lot of people
you're helping
now,
us with that.
they'll go out and they'll drop, tens of thousands of dollars on a wedding, where, wouldn't it be better to just give that newlywed couple, $10,000 or $20,000 to help set up a household, down payment for a house and things like that, instead of putting on this extravagant celebration that's gone in just a couple
And you
hours.
can still have a wedding.
You can have a nice wedding. I mean, my daughter, she did a nice wedding. It was very economical, they did a lot of the decorations themselves and stuff. And then we did give them some money, but we told them, okay, this is for your wedding. If you don't use all this money, you can, use it for other things. And that's what they did. They actually took that money and used it for other things. I'm fortunate that my son-in-law is a financial advisor. And that's his profession. So they're very frugal in those kind of things. So yeah, it makes
Apologize for
good
the
sense.
interruption, Charlie.
Oh no, this is good. That's what we're doing. Yes, that's true, Natasha. Keep it simple. Yes. All right. So planning for the future. And what we're going to be covering here is managing and using credit and we're going to talk about life, health, and long-term care insurance in a bit more detail. And then we're going to spend quite a bit of time here talking about saving for retirement and talking about investment and some of my advice, which hopefully, like I said earlier, it's free and you get what you pay for, but I think it will be helpful. And then talk a little bit about buying a home and estate planning. Yes, sir.
Would you like to dance here and then come back and finish this?
Well, I was just about to tell Charlie this would be a good place to stop and take a break and dance. So roll that beautiful bean footage. You caught me dancing.
That was from Mary Ann.
Yeah, he caught me. So anyway, yes, I do actually dance during the breaks. So yes, he caught me. All right, so here we go. We're gonna get into this stuff here and finish it out. We'll see how much longer we got here. Let's go on to the next slide here. And again, another scripture here, Proverbs 17:18. One who lacks sense gives a pledge and puts up security in the presence of his neighbor. Oh my gosh. Yeah, let's talk about this scripture for a second. I don't know if you understand what this is talking about, but this is talking about in our modern vernacular, co-signing for someone's loan. Okay. Because that's what putting up a pledge means. It's you're putting up some kind of security for someone else. Do not do this ever. I don't care if it's your loving spouse or if it's your your favorite child. I don't care who it is. Do not co-sign on a loan because you take on all the responsibility for that loan. You get none of the benefit. And if they default on it, it will kibosh your credit. And you may not even know that they defaulted on it until it's way too late and you're left trying to clean up the mess. So don't do this. That is extremely foolish. So, okay. So I'll get off my soapbox on that one. That there's a reason why I put these scriptures in here because they all have some kind of little meaning here as we go along. All right. So managing and using credit. We're going to talk about credit. Why do we even need it? I mean, can I just use cash and just forget about credit? Yes. Go ahead.
Before you move on, this idea that you have to co-sign for people because you quote unquote you don't love me if you don't and all that stuff.
Right.
Be real careful with this, folks, because that's used to manipulate you and people do things like that. If they loved you, they wouldn't
That's
ask you to
nudge.
put yourself in that position. Yes, that's nudge. If they actually loved you, they wouldn't ask you to put yourself in that position.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
just sorry about that, Charlie, but before
No,
we
no,
moved
no.
on too far, I
Serious.
wanted to make that comment in there. This is scripturally based, looking at how to
Yes.
handle your finances. So
Yes. That's why we're doing this because no problem. But like I was saying, why can't we just use cash? And well, it's getting harder and harder to do that nowadays. If you go around, there's a lot of places that are not even taking cash anymore, which
that's
is
by design.
against the law. But that's another story for another show that we could do later. But what we're going to talk about is the realities of credit. Like we talked earlier in the presentation, most people don't have cash laying around enough to purchase a house. And purchasing a house is actually a good investment because over time, in general, real estate does increase in value. So it is a good investment. Vehicles, on the other hand, are not an investment. But again, though, generally speaking, vehicles can get pretty expensive to get one that's reliable enough to, be suitable for, going back and forth to work and things like that. So you may need a loan for a vehicle. But with that, do not take out a loan longer than, well, I prefer to keep vehicle loans to 36 months. There's one advocate that says 42 months, but I don't see many 42-month loans out there. But you definitely don't want to go past 48 because when you extend the time of that loan, what you end up being is what's in the industry is called upside down in the vehicle, the entire loan. So that basically you owe more on the vehicle than the vehicle is worth throughout the entire loan. And so you can't get out of it. If something happens and, the vehicle turns out to be a lemon or you get into financial difficulties and you need to let that vehicle go, it can be a real problem if you have these extremely long loans. They're doing loans now of 7+ years on vehicles. Don't do that stuff. And there's nothing wrong with buying a used vehicle. But I do encourage you, if you are going to buy a used vehicle, find a mechanic that you trust and have them check it out. Even if it costs you $100 or so or whatever to get it checked out, that's good money put in there, because I've done it a couple of times where I've taken some vehicles to my mechanic and they looked at it and said, you don't want to buy this vehicle because this, and this. And they've saved me from buying something that would have turned out to be a bad purchase. Same thing with houses. Where I live, we had a major hurricane here just a few years ago, and I purchased a home after that hurricane. I had every conceivable inspection done on the property that I purchased to make sure that everything was going to be okay. So use common sense with those things. Now, credit cards. Do I need a credit card? You can probably live without a credit card, but if you're going to do any kind of traveling, you kind of need one, because most rental car companies will not rent to you unless you have a credit card. Many hotels kind of frown on debit cards. That's another thing. Debit cards, they are worthless. Don't use debit cards except to get money out of the ATM. Again, this is one of these financial things that Congress, in their infinite wisdom, they removed a lot of the consumer protections on debit cards, so that, like with a credit card, if you have a problem with a purchase, you have 60 days to dispute it and then work out getting your money back or getting the issue resolved, and you don't have to pay that bill until the issue is resolved, whichever way it's resolved. With a debit card, they take real money out of your checking account and they hold on to it, and there's no consumer protections on it. And there are some banks that are better than others in giving you your money back and stuff, but don't do it. But like I said, for traveling and things like that, credit cards, kind of something, that's good to have. And if you use credit cards like I do, I've got some rewards credit cards. I actually am one of the people that credit card companies hate, because I earn money on my credit cards. I pay off my balance every month, but I've got one credit card to get 2% back. I've got a gas card to get 5% back and things like that. So I actually make money off of them. So that's something you can look at. But when we're talking about credit, and I'm talking about your credit rating now, and there's 3 bureaus: Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian are the 3 major credit monitoring companies. They do dossiers on you, and they sell that information, and they build up these scores on you. One's called a FICO score. That's the most accepted one, and there's an Advantage score out there now and some other scoring models. Basically, they're building a portfolio on you to determine and give other credit grantors an idea of whether you're a good risk for them in loaning money to you. And you might say, well, I'm not going, I'm done with debt. I don't want to get any debt anymore. So why should I worry about my credit rating? Well, the problem is in today's society, they're starting to use this score for other reasons. And I just had a thought come into my mind. Yeah, this is your social credit score. But anyway, that's another story for another class. But it can be used by employers. A lot of employers now, as you apply for employment, they're going to say, sign this paper so we can do a credit check on you, because that's how part of the process to determine what your character is and stuff and whether they want to hire you or not. Car insurance and home insurance now are actually using credit scores above what your actual driving or your home insurance record is for claims. You can be the worst possible driver with bunches and bunches of claims, but if you have a high credit score, you'll get a better insurance rate than those with a lower credit score that has perfect driving records. It's crazy, but that's what they're doing now. So the credit scores and stuff we're going to talk about a little bit here are kind of a necessary evil in today's society. Now, I'm going to talk real quick about credit freeze. Like I said, these companies make money. You are not their customer, by the way. Their customer is the credit grantors. Like I said, they're building these dossiers to sell this information to credit grantors so that they can determine if you're a good credit risk. So you're not their customer. Make that clear. But there are some things you can do to stop them from actually building these dossiers and selling these to these credit grantors. And there's two ways to do it. One's good and one is much better. Most of these credit agencies, the three big ones I talked about, have programs for what's called credit lock. These are their proprietary programs that they actually put into place to kind of combat the next one I'm going to talk about. But a credit lock doesn't stop them from selling your information. It just locks your credit so that if somebody were to get like your social security number and address and enough information that they could fraudulently apply for credit in your name or with your information, they will stop that. But a credit freeze, and this was instituted by Congress, and this is a superior way of doing it, that stops them from even selling your information to credit grantors. Now, with that said, if you do put a credit freeze in place, like if you apply for employment or for a car loan or a home loan, you have to go in and unfreeze or thaw your credit so that they can actually pull your credit information. And you can do that for a short period of time, depending on what kind of loan you're doing, for just a few days to a few months. But that also does stop nefarious actors from getting credit in your own name. So I do highly encourage you to freeze your credit if you haven't already done so. It's a fairly easy process. Takes roughly 15 minutes to set it up initially, and thawing it can just take like 5-10 minutes at the most. It's fairly easy. All right, so let's talk about this credit score thing that I've been talking about. This is how they determine your credit score. The most important thing is your payment history. If you have a missed payment 30 days late or more, that's going to kill your credit, because that's 35% of your credit score. So if you miss a payment, it's going to just devastate your credit score. The amount owed, you want to keep, and this is what's really weird. I didn't learn this until later on in life, because I always thought, well, I want to keep my available credit really, really low because that reduces my risk. And I'm like, so I would close accounts or reduce the available credit on credit cards and things like that. And what I found out later I was actually doing damage to my credit score, because your amount of credit, and this is counterintuitive, like I said, but you want to use less than 30% of your available credit. And what I mean by available credit is how much you have available on all your different credit lines. Like if you have loans out there, whatever the loan value was of that loan, whatever your credit limit is on credit cards, and so on and so forth. You add all those together, and then how much of that you actually have in debt. You want that to be less than 30% for a good credit score. If you want to have a very good, outstanding credit score, you want that to be less than 10%. Then next is the length of credit history. That's how long you've had these loans, how long you've held a credit card or a home loan, things like that. That's 15%. New credit, that's like new loans, new credit cards, that's 10%. And then your credit mix is 10%. That's like how many different types of credit you have. Like, do you have a home loan, an auto loan, revolving credit, and so on and so forth? Yes, sir.
I don't know who it was, but somebody told me that a lot of this credit score stuff is about telling the lenders that you are a user of credit, not how dependable you are, but how much you like to use their credit. Is there anything to that?
Yes, absolutely. That's why I said it's counterintuitive that the more available credit you have that you're not using necessarily, but the more available credit you have, because like, say you have $1 million of available credit and you're using, 100,000 of it. Oh, you're going to have an outstanding credit score.
So you're saying this is a double-edged fish lure. It's to show the banks how trustworthy I am, but it's also to lure me into taking out more credit.
Absolutely. Yes. And
keep
that's how
me in
people
debt.
get into trouble. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I got it now. In other words, don't bite the lure,
Right. Right.
because
You
that way
do.
you end up in the
Yeah.
boat.
Yeah. Keep your amount owed below that 30% and preferably below the 10%. And we'll talk a little bit about, I think in maybe the next slide, we'll talk about credit cards and how to handle those. But that's how your credit score is determined. And so those are the things you want to keep in mind as you're dealing with credit and those kind of things. All right. And this shows, this is based on the FICO scoring model. It goes from 300 to 850. And it just shows you what percentage of Americans are in each category. And and so basically, if you're they use 740 to 799 for good. You really want to be above 760 for most things for most lenders to be considered very good. I don't necessarily agree with this slide, but if you're up in the 800 to 850, you shouldn't have any problem with credit. That's considered outstanding. Now, there are some ways to keep up with your credit. Now, not all of these things will give you an actual FICO score, but many of your credit cards now are providing access to your FICO scores or an Advantage score, which is another scoring model or a similar scoring model, on their statements or through their websites. Discover started this several years ago, and a lot of the other lenders have picked up on it because they pay for these scores every month. And they're like, well, if I'm paying for this, why don't I share it with my customers so they know where they're at? And so they started doing that. So you can kind of keep up with where you're at. But there are some monitoring sites that are free out there that can help you to keep an eye on your score. And these are good sites that will notify you if someone has got hold of your identity and are actively using your name to get credit in your name or using your information, because sometimes they'll use your information but use a different name. That happened to my wife several years ago. They used her social security number, but they used a different name, and it made a mess for her. It took over 6 months for us to unwind that and resolve all the issues that came of that. So that's why credit freeze, like I talked about earlier, is so important. But two of them that are out there is called Credit Karma and Credit Sesame. Either one of those is good. I use Credit Karma myself. You do need to set these up before you freeze your credit, because they do need to have access to your credit in order to get your information to start the monitoring process. And also make sure you look at this link correctly, because there's like freecreditreport.com and a bunch of other ones out there that are going to try to sell you stuff. Even this one's going to try to sell you stuff, but this one is the official one that was put together as part of congressional action, where you can get a copy of your credit report once a year from each of the three credit bureaus at annualcreditreport.com. Now, that won't give you a credit score, but it will give you all your credit information that's in their dossiers that they have on you. And as part of that process, if you find a problem in there are ways to dispute incorrect information on your credit report. And you want to use that process and be prepared for a fight. Because typically what they do, you'll submit a thing saying, hey, this information is incorrect, please correct it. And what they do is they kind of, with their computer systems, go out to whoever put in the incorrect information, and they will say, hey, is this stuff right? And the people say, oh yeah, sure, it's right. And so they really didn't do any real investigation. It's just a process they go through. So you're probably going to have to appeal that process and force the people to actually show where that information is correct. So it is a fight, but you want to work through that to resolve any inaccuracies in your credit report, because those inaccuracies will affect your credit score. So that's how to kind of manage your credit score here. All right. Let me look at something here. Give me just a second before we come on. Where are you?
Charlie's being Charlie.
Yeah, I'm being Charlie right now because I want to check something, because there's some stuff I want to cover, but I don't know what's in.
You shouldn't pretend to be the professor. It's not as easy as it looks.
Yeah, I'm not.
You're supposed to be prepped.
Yeah. Okay, well, I just wanted to talk briefly, before we get into insurance, just talk a little bit more on credit cards. Because like I said, if you're traveling and things like that, just a rule of thumb with credit cards, you want to try to have at least two. I would encourage you to have 3 credit cards from different issuing agencies. And the reason you want that is, going back here to this slide here, if somebody canceled a credit card on you, that could devastate your credit, because like going back here to your amount owed, if they take away, say, 30,000 of available credit, they cancel an account that's 30,000, that could put you in a real pinch with your amount owed. So if somebody did that, you want to immediately apply for another line of credit to keep that up there. But if you have credit cards from at least 2, preferably 3 places, it'll help you, so that'll lessen the impact if that happens, because like right now they're starting to tighten the credit because people are starting to get overextended, and you want to lessen that impact. So that's just a rule of thumb to throw out there to help you out. All right, so I wasn't sure if I had that in here later in the slide deck, and I didn't, so just wanted to cover that real quick. All right, life insurance. Yeah, we're going to talk about that in some more depth. Like Joe was talking earlier, you want term life insurance, term. Yes, that's exactly what you want. There are purposes for whole life insurance. Like I said, if you're extremely wealthy, that is one reason. There are aspects of whole life that can give you some tax advantages and stuff if you're extremely wealthy, but in general, not necessarily a good product, because they're very expensive. I did make, and I'll be right up front, I made a mistake many years ago, which I'm still paying for today, and and it's why I continued working longer than I wanted to. And still there's risks in my financial plan because I decided not to take certain spousal benefits from one of my pensions and replaced it with insurance, but I ended up replacing it with term insurance. And now I'm at the age where my term is coming up, and because of health issues, I'm no longer underwritable. So I can no longer get term insurance at a reasonable rate, and that caused problems. I should have used either elected to get that spousal benefit as part of the retirement package, or replaced it with a whole life policy if that were more economical. So there are reasons why you would want whole life, or sometimes they call it permanent life, because it usually goes to like age 100 and such. And then there's universal index. There's so many names for this stuff anymore. It's garbage. Do not do it. I don't care how nice the little glossy pamphlets are that they give you, and how nice their little projections are that they give you. It's all a lie. Okay, they're going to lie to you. These insurance agents, because you'll see in the actual verbiage of these things, in the small mice type, where you can't read it unless you got 1,000 times microscope, that says that whatever the insurance agent tells you doesn't matter. It's only what's written in the actual contract. So they can lie through their teeth to you, and you're stuck with whatever they gave you. These policies are extremely expensive. They can cause you a lot of tax consequences later on down the road. Horrible products. So stay away from universal, indexed, variable, whatever the weirdo names are that they're. Stick with term life insurance. And what's the purpose of life insurance? I mentioned that briefly earlier in the presentation. It's to replace the income of the breadwinner if something were to happen to that breadwinner, to provide for the family in the event that they can no longer earn the income that's sustaining the family. That's the purpose of life insurance. So that's what you're looking to do. And term life insurance is perfect because typically term life insurance, you want to try to get it to basically the point where you're going to retire, and then you've got other resources that come into play to fill in the void anyway for those kind of things. Health insurance. This one can be tricky, and it gets trickier and trickier all the time because this is just a broken system, and it's hard to deal with. Most people get health insurance through their employer, and that's actually a fairly good place to go because usually the employer will pay a good portion of the premiums for that. You do also have healthcare.gov, or Obamacare, as you might want to call it. It's out there for those that are self-employed, or for some reason don't have other means. And these are government subsidized insurance programs. But if you're actually, it works on a sliding scale based on your income. If you don't have much income, these things could be worthwhile for you. But if you have any kind of substantial income, you're going to find that healthcare.gov gets extremely expensive. So you need to be looking perhaps outside of the marketplace. And they have what's called qualified insurance that is what makes it expensive, because they have to cover pre-existing conditions and such, which makes this insurance very, very expensive for those that are providing the insurance. There are products out there that are high deductible insurance products out there, or sometimes they're called catastrophic plans. They just cover you like once you have a very serious disease. You're paying like the first several $1,000s, maybe the first $10,000 or more, you're responsible for. But if you hit that threshold, then they kick in and start paying. One of the good things with a high deductible health plan is generally these are eligible for what's called a health savings account. This is the most tax advantaged savings vehicle that's out there today because it's pre-tax, grows tax-free, and is spent tax-free. The money in a health savings account. So if you have the opportunity to participate in that, you want to, and you can actually invest this money and use it later on. Yes, Joe.
Oh, Mr. Cotta. Where would the health share plans go into? Like, I'm in a share program, a Christian ministry share program, and oh my gosh, they're actually pretty darn good, or they were for us.
Yes, that's good. I'm glad you brought that up because that's one I didn't think about putting in here. There are health share programs. They're typically faith-based, and what they do is they pool together their risk in a pool, and then when you have medical bills, you will submit an application for reimbursement to them, and out of the money that they've pooled together, they will pay your medical bills. The problem with Medishare programs is when you have a catastrophic illness, because
but that's not
sometimes they can't handle that. Because it's more than what the pool can handle.
Yes, and I know
so
Medishare,
that's the
Medishare bases your contribution according to, you can choose how high a level of dollars that they pay up to, and your contribution to this every month is based on how high you want your coverage to be. But I know, for example, I had a ER visit several years back that was tens of thousands of dollars, and we ended up not paying much of anything. They didn't even charge us our full deductible.
Now, with a Medishare program, what I would recommend that you do just to cover you
plan.
Is add a catastrophic plan or a high deductible plan on top of that to cover any catastrophic problems. That would be a good blend of those two together.
I don't know if it's changed, but CAT plans used to be, for what you were getting, they used to be fairly affordable.
Yeah, they are, because you have to reach that CAT, and most people won't hit that. So
yeah, because they're for like serious accidents, you've lost a limb, cancer, et cetera, et cetera. They're catastrophic. That's exactly what they were meant for.
Yeah, so they're very affordable. And typically, like I said, a lot of those you're eligible for the health savings account. And if you can not actually use the money out of the health savings account, but leave it in there and let that compound over the years. And what's the interesting thing about this is if you save your receipts, you can go back later on, say you keep saving this account until you hit retirement age, and then you start pulling from it. You can actually use receipts from years past to get money out of that health savings account, as long as it was a valid medical expense, even though it occurred many years ago. Now, that's what the law is today. It could change at any time, but
the cool thing about
that's
that
an
is
advantage.
A lot of things are legitimate medical expenses that may not be covered under any of your other plans, like eyes, dental, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
All right.
So those are some good things. Yep. Thanks. I appreciate that, because that's something I hadn't thought of putting in there.
Well, as a self-employed individual, that's how I cover myself.
That's right.
Medishare and CAT plans and things like that, and it's thousands of dollars a year cheaper than otherwise, with pretty decent coverage.
Yeah, that's good. And lastly, long-term care insurance. Long-term care insurance is, again, one of those broken programs. And long-term care insurance is needed for kind of the ones that are in the middle. If you are, dead poor and have no assets, you don't need to worry about long-term care insurance. If you're extremely rich and you have money coming out your ears, you don't need long-term care insurance. But if you are in that middle zone, this is where it's helpful to have. But the problem is because of increasing inflation and of course, all the stuff they're doing now to prolong life and everything else, there's very few insurers in this market, and you're going to find it's extremely expensive. I do have a policy for my wife and myself. It has doubled in premiums several times over the past few years. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
This is also an area where it tests our faith, because
Yes.
long-term care, if you're going to walk the walk, should rest on the believers primarily.
Right.
Because a lot of long-term care is nothing more than people are getting old, they've had a stroke or they're infirm, and they actually need our help. And we need to do what years ago we used to do. But now we
Right.
want to farm that out to anybody other than ourselves. And then we complain
Right.
about how expensive it is and how poor the care is. Well, I'm not saying this is an easy one, folks. Don't get me wrong. I just
No.
said this is where your faith gets tested.
Right.
So
And this is one where, I agree with you for a lot of cases with this, until someone gets to the point where they need really high level long-term care insurance or long-term care. Yes, you can take care of these things yourself. But when you get to the point where, they need, advanced care, oops, sorry, I pressed the wrong button. That's where this can be helpful. And like my goal is to stay in my home as long as I possibly can. And there's provisions in our long-term care insurance for, doing things, there's an allotment for so much money to make modifications to the house so that I can stay here. And it does, have a certain daily allotment for a certain period of time for paying others to help care for me and stuff. But like I said, this is a damaged product right now, because when they did the initial underwriting for these, they woefully underestimated how much these things were going to cost. And like I said, there's just continuing increases in premiums, and I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. There are some products that are coming on the market now that are kind of like whole life policies that have long-term care provisions in them. This would be another case where I would be okay with you looking into a product like that, but be very, very careful with the details of it and make sure you understand what you're getting into and what the costs are in it, to make sure that those will meet your needs. But this is a real difficult area to deal with. All right, here's a big one. Saving for retirement. All right, now, if you are with a traditional employer, most traditional employers now provide 401ks or 403b or other plans like 457s and other retirement vehicles for saving money. Many times employers will match, like for instance, they'll match the first 6% that you put in, either dollar for dollar or 50 cents on the dollar or something similar to that. If you have a retirement plan that you're eligible for with your employer, I encourage you to at least do the amount that they match, whatever it is, if it's 6%, and even if they just, match 3% of that 6, do it. That's free money. That's like giving yourself a raise. So do that. Now, something that's come into play fairly recently over the past couple of years is they have started having options within the 401ks and these retirement vehicles with a Roth version versus traditional. And what a Roth is that's money that you put in post-tax. In other words, you've paid the tax on it already, and then you put the money in there. And what this allows that money to do is you've already paid the tax on it, but it grows tax-free throughout your retirement accumulation process. Whereas traditional, you put money in there, you get an upfront tax advantage on it. Yeah, I saw that. Buy gold, Clay. Yeah. Problem is with that is you have to store it and protect it, but that's another story for another day. But yeah, in traditional, they will generally give you a tax break up front, reduce your taxes in the current year, but then you have to pay taxes on it when you withdraw it. And the problem with that is, this is going to increase in value over time, at least hopefully. And so you're going to end up paying more taxes in the end. So it's better if you have the Roth option with the 401k or whatever program you have, use the Roth option. Now, the company's match is still going to be traditional, but that's okay. That still gives you different kinds of money to pull from in retirement. Gives you a little bit of flexibility. Now, above that, there's also a Roth individual retirement account. There are income limits on this. Again, if you make a lot of money, as your income increases, your ability to participate in this program is reduced. But for most people I'm talking to, you're probably able to do this. And I believe the current limit for Roth today is $7,000 a year. There are plus ups if you're above 50. And you can put that money in there. And again, this is post-tax money. It grows tax-free and is spent tax-free in retirement. Another thing I forgot to mention with the 401ks and such, when you take out money from those in retirement, there is an age limit. I believe that's 72 currently. They keep changing these things. So, and there's what's called required minimum distributions. There's a certain point where you have to start taking money out of these. But with a Roth IRA, there is no RMDs. And again, with the traditional IRA, you also have RMDs. And again, with the traditional IRA, you get the tax advantage up front. But again, you have to pay taxes on it in retirement, and you have to deal with the RMDs. So I don't recommend the traditional IRA unless you make a lot of money. What would you split on 10% saving income rule be? Okay, so all right, with both types of IRAs, what would the split on the 10% savings income rule be?
Teach,
Okay,
you gotta read the question first, because we've got people that are just listening, not looking.
Yes, thank you. I'm not used to doing this. See, I'm not the professional like Joe is. So anyway, this is from the Tortoise. With both types of IRA, what would the split on the 10% savings income rule be? If you've already met your 6 months of living expenses rule, then I would be putting this 10% all in a Roth vehicle if at all possible. Unless, of course, you hit these income limits and you're ineligible to do those things. But I'd throw it all in the Roth. The reason the Roth IRA is so flexible is that you can take out your contributions to a Roth IRA at any time penalty free. Now, any of your increases to it, of course, you can't take out until retirement, but anything that you've put into it yourself, you can take out penalty and tax free. So it's a very flexible vehicle. So, you have your 6 months emergency fund. And if something happened where, say, for instance, you were having a tough time finding a job and you went through your 6 months of emergency fund, if you had this money put into a Roth IRA, you could actually draw from that money that you contributed and use that, to take care of that emergency. The only downside is, of course, you can't put that money back in that you take out, except to the annual limits that are allowed. So that's the flexibility of the Roth IRA. It's a very good retirement vehicle. And then for those that are self-employed, like Joe here, there's what's called a solo 401k, and there's also a simplified employee pension. The solo 401k is fairly easy to set up. The SEP is a bit more paperwork, but you can sock away a lot more money under the SEP, is my understanding. I'm not, an expert on these things, but like, for instance, in your case, even though your wife is working and, she's got a retirement vehicle that she's using, as long as you're showing your income and stuff like that, you could use some of these and even pull from some of her discretionary income to put into some of these retirement vehicles. Yes.
Well, first of all, I'm not going to poo-poo retirement. This is a good thing. I just want to point out that it's not in Scripture.
Right.
We're supposed to stay useful and productive all the way to the end of our lives because, it's you're part of the body. If you go into retirement, it's just wrought full of spiritual booby traps, pitfalls.
But actually, there is retirement in Scriptures.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, I know. For the priests, they can no longer be priests. They're not exposed.
Right.
They're not supposed to just go sit in a tent for the rest of their life.
But even those priests that are retired, if you read it carefully, it still says that they're to be there to be of help in that. It's just they're not in the normal rotation of duties.
I'm not degrading retirement. Don't get me wrong. That's fine.
Right. Right.
If you're going to go into retirement, find something to stay busy with the body with.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah. Now I gotta be Charlie. One other thing there, Professor. You got several really dense slides left, and the Mickey Mouse say tick-tock.
Yeah. Well, this one's probably the most in-depth one because this is good stuff here. And it's important. All right. So next, Proverbs 28:20. A faithful man will abound with blessings, but whoever hastens to be rich will not go unpunished. So, there's another scripture I could have put in here and I didn't put it in here. It's, money's the root of all evil, right? Isn't that the scripture? I haven't seen the comments blow up at me.
Love of money.
Thank you. The love of money. People always misquote that scripture. I always get mad at that because money is a tool. Okay. And that's what we're talking about here is utilizing this tool to its best use. And if you're there trying to get rich, that's not the gospel plan. That's not what we're supposed to be about. We're supposed to be building the kingdom. And that's not about making ourselves rich, but rather using the tool that we have to help others. So that's the importance of this scripture, I think. All right. So investment advice. Like I said, I'll give you some investment advice here, but my advice is free and you get what you pay for. So big thing here, the place where you put your money for any of these retirement programs, or even if you're just doing traditional investing in stocks or bonds or whatever, it matters. And you need to really get into the plan fees, especially for if you're working for a traditional employer. You want to get into the plan documents and understand what all their administrative fees are and all the other fees that go with that. And then also typically within those plans, in addition to the plan fees, each individual investment that you have within that plan also has fees associated with it. Like if you have an index fee, it's going to have a certain amount of fees associated with it to manage that index fund and such. So the reason this stuff's important is these fees are going to take away from that money, that capital that you've invested. And with some of these programs, especially, well, I'll say it this way. You do not want to have your investments with a bank or an insurance company, because they are going to fee you to death. And let's see here. We got another one. Oh, yeah, there we go. This is from Arctic Tortoise, Psalms 35, 5-7. Depend on Yahweh, trust him, and he will take care of you. And yes, that is exactly where we need to be. But like I was saying, banks and insurance companies run away fast because their fees are going to be so high. You want to be with an actual brokerage firm for these things. I do have recommendations here. These are all fiduciary firms for the most part: Vanguard, Fidelity, and Schwab. TIAA CREF, I put this in here for people that may be in public service or teachers. That's for 403Bs. And let me talk about 403Bs just for a second. Congress did a disservice to our public service people and teachers. And these 403B programs are, for the most part, horrible. And they're extremely high in fees. Many of them are done with insurance companies. And I would recommend that if you do have that where you work, that you only contribute to whatever the match is that your employer gives, and then do your own IRA, Roth IRA outside of that. And if you still want to do more above that, I'd actually encourage you to do a traditional investment account over and above using these, unless, of course, it is with TIAA CREF. Fidelity does have some programs in there. So if it's with one of these investment houses, you're probably okay. But anywhere else, I would not. And then, time in the market versus timing the market. We're in this for the long haul. You're going to start working probably in your 20s, and you're going to work till your 60s, 70s. And you want to use that time value of money we talked about earlier, and how you can compound the money over time. And so that's what you want to do. Don't try to play this, what I would call gambling in the market, where you try to, get the hottest stock and, stuff like that. I've done a little bit of that here and there, and I'll tell you, it's failed on me every time. I've lost my tail on a couple occasions because I got a little too cocky, and I tried to do some timing of the market, and it backfired on me. So just tortoise, slow and steady wins the race. There you go. That's what you want to do. And with this, when you're in the accumulation phase, targeted retirement funds are a good way to do it. It's simple. Most of these plans have them where they'll, you decide when you're going to retire, and they'll have what's called a targeted retirement fund for that particular year. And they automatically adjust the mix of investments to make it become more conservative over time, to help you to maximize your risk and such, and maximize your return over time. But do keep an eye on fees, because there are some targeted retirement funds where the fees are so high that it would make sense for you to perhaps do your own index funds or ETFs, electronically traded funds that are out there, which are index funds that are traded as stocks. And if you want to learn more about this stuff, if you want to get into some more of the details here, Investopedia is a good website to go to start learning about investing and figuring out how to do some of this stuff. All right, buying a home. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but we talked earlier about this a little bit, about, make sure that you don't buy more house than you can afford. You really want to be conservative with this and even have some extra buffer, because over time things change, and you want to be able to have a little bit of buffer so that if things get rough, you can still make your mortgage note. If you're buying a home for the first time, I really encourage you to use a real estate broker. Now, notice I used the word broker. I didn't say real estate agent. A broker is a level above an agent. Real estate agents work under a broker. So a real estate broker is going to have more experience. So if you can, at all possible, have a real estate broker on your team, that's what you want to do. And then again, another thing, 15-year versus a 30-year mortgage. Oh my gosh, there's some things. I put up a little graphic here that kind of shows you the difference in how much you pay over time. If at all possible, try to get a 15-year note or even a 10 if you can over a 30-year mortgage. That'll save you a lot over time and you'll pay it off so much faster. Good thing to do. Set a goal. You want to have at least 20% down if at all possible. That'll help you to avoid what's called PMI. That's private mortgage insurance. That's something that they put on top of your mortgage, kind of an additional charge, and that's very expensive insurance. So you want to have that 20% down. If you can't do that, then you want to get to that 20% as quickly as possible. So again, make sure you're not buying more house than you can afford so that you can get down to that 20%. When you're shopping for a home, no new credit in the 6 months prior to taking out a mortgage, because that'll affect what the underwriters look at for determine your eligibility. And be prepared to hold your home for 7 to 10 years. Typically, that's the time you need to hold on to your home in order to sell it without taking a loss because of the costs involved in buying and selling a home. So you want to keep it for at least that period of time. If you're not going to keep that period of time, just rent until you can. All right, so that's buying a home. Estate planning. I'm just going to go over this fairly quickly. These are just things for you to think about. Estate planning is not super important if you don't have a lot of assets, but as you build assets over time, this can become extremely important to you. Life insurance is part of your estate planning. Like I've said before, this replaces the income of the primary breadwinner. A will is pivotal if you have children, because if you don't designate in your will who is going to care for your children, if perhaps you and your spouse were to die at the same time in a car crash or whatever, then the state's going to determine who your children go to. And I'm sure you don't want that happening. You can do wills, even simple wills. You can even do online. Nolo.com is one place you can go for that. And there's other places. They don't cost that much for a basic will. Like I said, as you get more assets, wills can get more complicated and then things get more expensive. But for just general things, you definitely want a will if children are involved. Trusts, again, unless you have a lot of money, something that you probably don't need to worry about. There are a couple different types of trusts that are common. A testamentary trust, that's a trust that doesn't actually kick into play until you actually die. Then that testamentary trust is activated and is set up. A revocable trust is a trust that you can set up while you're still living, and it's called revocable because you can revoke it or change it at any time prior to your death. So it gives you some flexibility, but it does set up the trust at that time so that your assets are protected in the event of your death, and it's already set up in the trust. Medical advance directives. If you're like me, I don't want to be put on life support of any duration. I'd be okay if they, had to quickly intubate me, to bring me back, quickly, but I don't want to be on like a ventilator. I don't want to have a feeding tube. I don't want any of that kind of stuff. And medical directives are not that hard to do. Many hospitals if you go into their patient affairs office, they will actually help you. They have, kind of blanket forms that you can fill out and select your things for both medical advance directives and medical power of attorney. That is where you designate someone to make medical decisions for you if you are not otherwise able to. You're unconscious, or you are no longer of sound mind, or whatever the case may be. And many of the hospitals will help you do those for free if you'd like. And I do encourage you to do those if that's something that's important to you. And then, of course, there's other powers of attorney. And these cover, like homes and vehicles, and just general powers of attorney to take care of things if you're disabled in some way that you can no longer make those decisions. So those are things to look at as far as estate planning. And this can get pretty complicated. Okay, John Deere 8000. I appreciate all this info. Believe it or not, I'm at the age of 55, and I knew very little of any of this insurance and investment knowledge. I learned about credit years ago. Never trusted investor. Yes. And yeah, I mean, it's get a good financial coach, Ray 13. Yes. There are financial coaches out there. That's another term out there in the industry. When you're talking about getting financial advice, and I'm going to go to my final slide here, and I just want to talk real briefly about that. I'm glad that Ray brought that up. If you're looking for financial advice, be very, very careful. Now, Ray mentioned they're a financial coach. Okay, there are financial coaches out there, and I don't want to disparage them. They can be very helpful, especially if financial coaches, in my view, this is Charlie's opinion, they can be very helpful to people kind of like I'm talking to in this presentation, that are just trying to start getting their finances in order and figuring out how to, do a budget and manage their debt and things like that. Financial coach can be very, very helpful in that. And typically they will be on a fee only or an hourly rate that you'll pay them for their services to help you with these basic aspects. When you get into financial advisors, it is very difficult because there are what's called, let me find it here. I've got it. There it is. Okay, here it is. There are two different standards when it comes to financial advisors. And this is based on actual law. One is called the suitability standard. And the suitability standard stipulates that advisors must consider each individual investor's position and provide guidance specific to what is suitable for the investor's needs. Stay away from them. If your investment advisor is a suitability contract, do not do it. The other one is a fiduciary standard. And what a fiduciary standard requires advisors to consider their clients' needs before their own. And what's important here is suitability. They only have to say, oh yeah, this is a good investment for them, even though I'm making a mega high commission on this, and it's a residual commission that I'll earn money and you're going to pay for my retirement. And many times these things have very, very high fees and is really not in the fiduciary interest of their clients. And that's why you want a fiduciary advisor, and you want one that actually signs a fiduciary contract with you. Beverly Dalton Baltras. Okay, this has been very good information. Some I knew, a lot I didn't. We just hitting 60, and your presentation has been top notch. Next up, hubby will be watching with me again. Well, I hope it's useful. And like I said, there's much more. I just breezed through this. I know I went a little bit over. Sorry about that. But if you want some more help with this.
We don't have set time on these shows. We talk, we run out of words.
Yeah.
Which is why the AI is not allowed to run the show.
Right. Because when you're looking for a financial advisor, you want one that is a fiduciary. There is some agencies out there that can help you find those. I'm looking real quick to see if I've got that on my list here real quick. I know the Garrett Planning Network is one. Garrett Planning Network typically is for like a one-time checkup on your finances. And you would pay them just a flat fee for taking a look at your finances and giving you advice. The National Association of Personal Financial Advisors, NAPFA, they're a group of fiduciary advisors, and usually they're a fee-based model. But they are fiduciaries. So those are people that you could go to. But again, make sure that they're signing an actual fiduciary contract with you for that. All right, Red Blood, listening, turning wrenches, plethora of info. We'll rewatch shortly. If I can figure out how to save it, I'm gonna. Thanks, y'all. Yeah, and this will be archived on Rumble. It'll be on YouTube as well. We'll put this probably in the Faith 101 series playlist on YouTube. And of course, it's available if you can find it on Facebook. I don't know how to find these things on Facebook, but I'm sure they're there.
You just go to the Road to Concord on Facebook and you follow it, and then you just look through the histories, or you go and you search for Class 390.
Yeah. And if you use Linux, you can use YouTube DL and download it from YouTube.
Don't forget, you're the one who has to sign us off today because you're the professor.
Oh, yeah, I get to do that today.
Yeah, you got to say the goodbyes.
Yeah, I got to say the goodbyes. Geez, I'm not used to all this. I'm not used to being in the limelight here. But this is one that was in my wheelhouse a bit. So, I've had it ready for a little while here. And I told Joe, whenever you need me to jump in to do this, I'm ready to go. And he got hold of me last night and said, hey, I'm having troubles because what I was going to present is bigger than I thought, and I need you to do it. So I'm like, okay, we're good. We'll do it. But anyway, we do appreciate all of you viewing our show, and we're hoping that we're helping you. That's why we're doing this. You know, like I said, I'm retired, but like Joe said, I'm really not retired because I'm doing this and a few other things. So I'm just as busy as I was when I was working. But we do this for you guys. We don't get any pay for this. We do appreciate those that are helping with the show, because that does help us with, you know, what it costs us to put this show on for you. But please, if you found this useful and you think it'll help someone else, share it with them. And like Joe says, share it directly, because we do get throttled on Facebook and YouTube and things like that. And if you like the show, thumbs up and like. That helps the original Charlie and Natasha. Shows them that you appreciate the work they do. Anyway, that's it for today. We love you, and
just remember, he worked until he got tired, so he quit. Then I put him back to work. Now he's retired.
That's it. So, all right. Well, good day, and we'll see you on Friday. got it set up.